Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another video. I feel crooked. Am I crooked? Let me straighten this up here. Still crooked. Oh well, we'll start anyway. So today we are going to talk in video 13 of my book on From Debtor to Better, the details of debt and how to get out. Guess what? We're talking today about how to act like a millionaire. So this is not the ever famous game show. This is not all the other, clickbaity kind of things on how I can teach you to be a millionaire in 3 easy steps. And no, today we are actually realistically going to talk about what it means to act like a millionaire. And that's straight out of my book. There's actually a chapter on that very topic. It's not a very long one, but it's a good one, I think. We're going to even talk through a couple of scenarios, and I might even read to you just a little bit because there are a couple of good ones that I put in the book that will be helpful to you. As with all the other 12 videos, and now number 13, you don't have to have the book to be following along. If you want to get it, it is on Amazon. I would encourage you to. Great, because I want to sell more books, but guess what? We're doing this because I want to help you get out of debt. So today we are going to talk about how to act like a millionaire. But as always, I want to back up and make sure that you remember the homework from our last video where we were talking about the 5 steps on how to get out of debt. Those 5 simple steps that you can actually take action on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and get out of debt. So homework assignment number 1 was to come up with 10 ways that you could cut your expenses right then and there. So maybe it's reducing your cable bill, maybe it's cutting out the cell phone insurance, maybe it's eating out less, whatever. Pick 10 things that you could do to cut your expenses immediately. And then I ask you to brainstorm 10 things that you could do to earn more income immediately. Have a yard sale, pick up some hours overtime at work, sell some stuff on Facebook, pick up a side hustle, whatever. Don't care what that is, I ask you to come up with 10 things. And then as always, because the point of coming up with those kinds of lists is to take action, my encouragement number 3 was, okay, you've come up with 10 ways to cut your income, get at it and do it. And the second one was come up with ways to earn extra income, take action as you reasonably can, and get to it. So today, if you've done those things, you've already started the process of trying to help yourself get out of debt. That was a part of those 5 simple steps. So go back and watch that video if you haven't already checked it out. But now we're going to talk about what it means to act like a millionaire. This is a really simple concept, okay? The problem is, and this is a big problem, society has decided what it means to look like a millionaire. If you go on Instagram, that's a great example. If you go on Instagram, you will find that if you have one of those accounts that has really expensive watches, really high-end cars, like the Lamborghini and the Ferrari, that kind of thing, luxurious vacations, and scantily clad women, then what you will find is those accounts have lots and lots and lots of followers. The other kinds of accounts that you will see that have lots are expensive clothes, really, really, really weird and fancy food, really high-end home decor. In other words, stuff that costs a lot of money. That's the key. Costs a lot of money. Because we look at that and we're like, ooh, luxury. A millionaire lives like that. Do they really? Do they really? But I challenge you, and this is not one of your homework assignments, but I challenge you to go and look at some Instagram accounts. Just start scrolling, and you find some picture that is eventually a fancy car, a fancy house, fancy decorations, whatever. Look at the hashtags, look at that account, and just see what's going on. Some of those accounts are just bizarre. It's like, hey, I saw one yesterday, not joking, because I was doing a little research, and there was literally stacks of $100 bills and packs of lunch meat sitting on top of those $100 bills. I wish I were joking. I don't get it. I don't know. Does this mean I went to Kroger and said, give me all your lunch meat and I'll throw hundreds at you? I don't get it. Is this the new thing in the club that instead of ordering expensive, bad-tasting alcohol that you order lunch meat? I don't know. Anyway, I am way off on the sidebar a little bit, but please stick with me here. The point is, you know what? We are confused about what it means to live like a millionaire. There are a lot of books that have been written. In fact, there's one that recently came out by the guy who wrote Retire Inspired. He's on Dave Ramsey's team, and his name is escaping me at this exact moment. I'm sorry if you know who that is right off, put it in the comments. But Everyday Millionaires. The one that I really liked as I started back a long time ago researching this was Thomas Stanley. Dr. Thomas Stanley wrote several books on millionaires, The Millionaire Next Door, and basically what his studies did and what this study, Chris Hogan. I got it. Chris Hogan was the guy on Dave Ramsey team that just came out with the Everyday Millionaires book. Sorry, Chris. I don't know you personally, but if you're watching this, if you happen to hear, please don't hate me. You're an awesome guy. Anyway, so the study is of people who are actually millionaires and who actually know what it means to have a net worth of more than $1 million, more than 10, more than $100 million. What is it that they live like? Where do they live? What do they drive? What kind of houses do they buy or not buy? What kind of stuff do they do? What kind of vacations do they take? All that kind of stuff he studied, and it painted the picture of here's what a real millionaire looks like. There's a difference in a millionaire and a really high income earner. Now, those two often coincide, but guess what? They're not always the same thing. So let's continue looking at what an actual millionaire looks like and some of the ways you can get there. Now, I've read a lot of Thomas Stanley's work, and I haven't read Chris Hogan's book yet. That's why I didn't remember the name. Shame on me. But I haven't read that book yet. But I know that what they're doing is they're putting together the idea of what does that person behave like. So Thomas Stanley came away with some consistent and constant things that you found in a person who had a high net worth. The very first of those is spending less than they earned. Now, I know this is an obvious thing. You know this is an obvious thing. This is not earth-shattering to any of us, but guess what? We don't think that way. We look at the Instagram account or the fancy lifestyles of the rich and famous, if you want to go back to the Robin Leach 1980s days, and we looked at all these people who were supposedly rich and all the stuff that they had that was so fancy and the caviar that they just, whatever. That's what we did. But the reality is the first thing and the first principle of acting like a millionaire is you do not spend everything you earn. Otherwise, you won't be a millionaire. So don't spend everything you earn. If you spend everything you earn and more than that, then that's a poor person. That's somebody who's really going to go in the hole. They're obviously going to be in debt. And that really is what gets us into debt, right? It's the obvious statement of the year. If you spend more than you earn, you have to come up with the money somehow, which means you had to borrow it, which means you are now in debt. So first, stop spending all you earn, but second, spend less than you earn. Remember we talked about this before. Income minus savings minus expenses equals 0. Savings. Spend all you earn by saving a lot of it. Spend all you earn by giving some of it away. Don't actually commit yourself to spending it all when it comes to reality of expenses. Okay? So spend less than you earn. Second, avoid status. Now in the book I said like avoid leading a status lifestyle or buying a bunch of status objects. There's a really awesome story that I'll tell more about when I talk in my next video about cars and debt, about how I needed, I'll use air quotes again there, a new Mercedes when I graduated from college, got my first job, and got my first big promotion. Well, that car was a great car, but guess what? I didn't need it. I needed new transportation. I needed reliable transportation, but I did not need to go buy a Mercedes. The reason I did that is because I wanted to impress people. I liked the car. It was an awesome car. It was a great car. But ultimately, when you boil it all down, I did that because I wanted to be impressive to other people. I wanted to be impressive to the people around me when I could have gone and gotten a very, very easily cheaper car that was as reliable or more, but I needed to have that status. Nothing wrong with owning a Mercedes if you can pay for it. Nothing wrong with owning a Ferrari, a Porsche, or take your pick of the fancy car if you can afford it. Nothing wrong with having a big old mansion if you can afford it. But avoid living the lifestyle of status. Because here's the thing. Most people don't care. Or if they do, they say, well, look at that jerk. He could have given that money to charity. Or look at that jerk. I'm poor. Sorry. Look at that jerk. I'm poor and have nothing. And here he is with all his money. He should have given some to me. The mentality is that the evil rich, that's the mentality of most people who don't have money, is they look at rich people and say, I need to be rich too. It's only fair. No. No. The things that you're doing by following along with these videos and working through this book is what's going to make you rich. It's what's going to get you out of debt, which puts you ahead of most people anyway, and get you into the mentality of being rich. It is not evil to be rich, okay? It is not evil to be rich. All of us want to be rich, and then we suppress that because we think it's bad. All the eye rolls. See the eye rolls here? Just makes no sense. So don't try to live a status lifestyle. I would rather you have millions in the bank and drive a normal car, live in a normal house, and act normal. But now normal by our standards today actually means that you look like you're poor. Okay, sort of going along with me, I think. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later too, but I want you to avoid status. Don't just buy something because other people will be impressed that you own it. Buy something because you either need it, or you want it and have the money, or you wish for it and have ultimately achieved the freedom to make that purchase without regret. Okay, that's what that means. Number 3, take financial risks as they are worth the reward. Now this is sort of a hard concept to explain. If you don't take any risk, and that's actually where I very, very, very first started this book, was to understand risk. And if you think about it, you have to take some financial risk to gain reward. You can't just say, okay, I'm not going to spend money anymore. I'm going to put all that money under my mattress and all is well, and I will be a millionaire. No, you can't just hide the money and expect it to grow. I mean, that's even biblical. If you think to the parable of the talents, what happened to the one who hid his talent, buried it in the ground, and did nothing with it at all? He was a wicked servant. He was reprimanded, and his talent was given to the one who had invested and made the most return. So you have to take risks, but you have to take risks that are worth the reward. Let me put it in some perspective for you. If you're currently in debt, investing is probably not the thing that should be on your horizon. Getting out of debt should be. But guess what? Getting out of debt is a risk. You are actually taking a risk by investing in getting out of debt instead of investing in the stock market or investing in a new car or a nicer house or whatever else. It's called opportunity cost. In economic terms, it's called opportunity cost because you're passing up on the opportunity to do this because instead you did that. So consider the opportunity cost. Consider the risks that you're taking and take the risks that are worth the financial reward. Now, again, let's talk about if you're in debt, because that is the focus of what we're working through. Getting out of debt is a wonderful thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't be preaching all about how to do it and why you should do it. Getting out of debt is a wonderful thing. However, there are risks associated. You have to have a smaller emergency fund for a time, which means there's the risk that if something goes wrong, then you may have to go into more debt. There is the risk that you're not going to buy a new car as soon as you would have previously, so your car may die and you may be stranded without great transportation for a bit. There is the risk, well, you get my point. Take the risks that make sense. So you got to sit down, and there's your homework assignment number 1. Sit down and think, okay, if I'm going to get out of debt, if I'm really working on this, and I'm hoping that you are, what risks am I putting myself out there to, and are they worth it? Because you need to balance those risks. If you have a car that's got 400,000 miles and just barely starts half the time when you go out to start it, it might be time to spend money on a new car, on a newer, more reliable car than it would be if you're just sitting there with something that just runs. Okay, think about those things. We have to achieve some balance. We'll talk again more about that in the next video on cars. So I actually want to read to you a little bit. Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. But I think this puts it in some really good perspective. It's straight out of my book, and if you happen to own the book, I believe for you it's on page 55, unless you've got a various different edition. But it's chapter 9 where I talk about Act Like a Millionaire. I'm going to read you 2 scenarios that really capture well, I think, what this is all about and how it works. Scenario 1. You have a good paying job that pays enough to cover all your minimum payments on about $40,000 worth of debts, credit cards, personal loans, cars, and covers your normal household needs, food, clothing, mortgage, etc. You've been smart by investing 20% of your take-home pay into retirement, and you've got a nice nest egg built, currently about $250,000. One day, your boss calls you into his office and tells you they have to let you go because of downsizing. You must immediately figure out how to pay your bills or you're in big trouble, right? Cashing out your retirement costs a lot in taxes and penalties, so you don't want to go there. What do? Well, your only really good option is to hope you can find another job that will pay at least as well as this one, and fast. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of creditors calling and the situation will go bad quickly. Let's talk about that from a risk perspective and acting like a millionaire. When you understand the risk of having debt and understand the risk associated with taking on minimum payments that you can afford, no problem, everything's good, you are assuming that tomorrow is good. When you take out debt, and we've talked about this before, when you take on debt, you are assuming that tomorrow I can make those payments. But what happens if? Or maybe what happens when things go wrong? Because guess what? Life happens. People get sick every day. People get in accidents every day. People get hurt every day. People lose their job every day. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I would rather you not be so concerned with, oh my goodness, what happens if I lose my job tomorrow? I would rather you be in the position of saying, Well, I don't want to lose my job tomorrow, but if it happens, it will be okay. Let me read you scenario 2. Same situation as scenario 1, except you have no debt except your mortgage. Paying off your debts, however, instead of investing the 20% of your take-home pay for the 3 years, let's assume that it took you to do so, it cost you 3 years of being able to invest in your retirement. So now you only have about $150,000 in your retirement fund, but to try to make up for it, you're now putting 25% of your pay into retirement to try to catch up a little. One day, your boss calls you into his office and tells you they have to let you go because of downsizing. You also must immediately figure out how to pay your bills. The major difference here is that you have a lot fewer of those bills to worry about. You can go find pretty much any job that pays enough to cover your basic household needs and your small mortgage while you look for something that is better for you and your family. This idea gets to the heart of where I began this book. I don't want you to take unnecessary risks in your life. I believe that being in debt for anything except your home puts you in unnecessary risk and exponentially increases the chances of something going very wrong in your situation. If you haven't already read between the lines as I went through those examples, I do believe you should stop paying into your retirement fund while you're focused on paying off debt. This is a temporary thing. You're on a mission. Don't get lazy and waste your time getting out of debt because you're stopping your retirement funding, because it does cost you. It is an opportunity cost. Remember, the risk that's worth the financial reward. However, you can then have more to work with when you're out of debt. So, how do you act like a millionaire? I read you those 2 things. Again, forgive me for just reading straight out of my book, but I think they're good examples. The way that you do that is to recognize that most people who you think are millionaires are high income earners. And the moment that they stop earning a lot of income, they're broke. Professional athletes are an excellent example of this. Most of your professional athletes have way more money, like way more money than you and I will probably ever earn as their annual salary, and then they're broke the moment they can't play any longer. Why? Because they don't think about, oh yeah, I might want to save for tomorrow. Instead, I'm encouraging you to spend less than you earn and consistently get used to living a lifestyle that doesn't require you to spend everything that you have as your income. I always want you to grow your income, but I want you to be reasonable with it. Number 2, as I said before, avoid status. Don't try to live like the professional athlete. Don't be thinking, oh, look at all the jewelry I can wear and all the stuff that I can have and all the adornments and all the vacations. And all. There's nothing wrong with spending your money and having fun with it within the limits of what your budget tells you you can do. So avoid doing the stuff that's going to impress other people. If that's your primary purpose in doing something, you shouldn't be doing it, okay? And number 3, take the financial risks that pay off. Take the risks that are worth the reward. So if you're getting out of debt, that is a risk because, again, you're not saving for retirement as much. You're not being able to take the vacations and create the memories with your family that you could if you were just taking those vacations. You're not able to do the same stuff. You're working more hours. You're really focused and committed to getting out of debt, and that is a risk within itself. But is that a worthwhile risk? I would argue yes. You may argue no. That's for you to decide. So acting like a millionaire just really tries to put you in the perspective of making sure that you're in charge of your money and you're doing with it what you know to be the best. Make the most of what you have to work with. Now, last, as always, I got to give you some homework. Here's your homework. Consider a real millionaire. Think about the business owners that you know. Think about the people not who have their private jets and not who have their fancy cars and not all, but the guy down the street that runs the barber shop that's been there for 30 years. Or the deli where you go occasionally, or the restaurant owner that's been in business forever. Those normal people, I suspect if they've been in successful business for as long as they probably have some pretty good money and can probably teach you some lessons about money. They live normal lives. They are normal people. And as Chris Hogan, I remembered at that time, would say, they're the everyday millionaires. They're the people that you wouldn't necessarily suspect. So that's your homework. I want you to pay attention to the family that you know that has done well in business and doesn't live like they need to show off and impress you. I want you to pay attention to how they live and what they drive and where they go and what they do. And I want you to start to think more about that rather than the Instagram accounts that I mentioned early on. Pay attention to your finances and you can act like a millionaire and eventually one day probably be a millionaire. That's all I've got for you today. Take care. Have fun. We'll talk again soon.